Welcome to this Facebook Live video about making the most of reading aloud time. I'm so excited to be here with you today talking about this topic. Reading out loud to our kids is one of my favorite things to do and something that I am super passionate about. So I'm excited to talk about some strategies about how you can really make the most out of your read aloud time with your kids. And let me know in the comments, how often do you read out loud to your kids? I'm curious to know. I asked this question in the event as well, and we got a variety of answers. Some people that read out loud to their kids a few times a week, some people that try to do it every day. This video was actually inspired because we were talking in the comments of one of the previous events about how reading out loud to our kids more consistently was a 2023 goal for several different members of our group. And so today I wanted to just share some encouragement and some resources to help you if you have a goal to read out loud more to your kids in 2023 as well, to be able to help you to do that. Adelina says, hello, we read every night. That is awesome. I love that it's a part of your family's routine. That can be so helpful when you're trying to build a new habit, to find a time that is consistent in your family's routine that you can do it every day. So she said that she does it every night, and that's perfect because there's sort of an anchor and something that happens every day that triggers that to happen, I would guess. And in our family, we do the same thing. My son gets an extra half an hour to stay up late every night. Actually, we told him it was an extra half hour, but really we're putting him to bed a half hour early, so that he has that extra half hour. And that is his independent reading time. And so he has that time in bed with a book every night, and he knows that right before bedtime that happens. And so that's a consistent part of our family's routine for independent reading. But it can be really helpful to have a consistent time for read aloud as well. So I love that. That's great. Everybody else that's watching, share in the comments, how often do you read out loud to your kids? Allegra says, howdy, we try to do read aloud revival book recommendations and usually do it before bed and naps and often first thing in the morning. That's awesome. Yeah, it can really help to have a really good book list or a list of recommendations to jump off from so that you can get exposure to all sorts of new books too. That sounds like a really great strategy. And I love, she said, we do it before bed and naps and often first thing in the morning. We actually do our read alouds first thing in the morning as well, Allegra. We do ours during breakfast. So my kids eat breakfast and I read out loud to them. And I'll read whatever needs to be read out loud for all of the day's homeschool lessons. So usually our Bible study and either our science or our history lesson. And then we also have a read aloud that I'll read as a part of that time as well. So we just finished the final book in the My Father's Dragon series this morning. If you have younger kids, I would highly recommend that series. It was super funny and my kids really enjoyed it. So that was a really good read aloud choice for us. Okay, so I wanted to start by sharing a quick statistic about reading aloud to our kids, which I think is really interesting. And this is my absolute favorite statistic to share when it comes to read aloud. It says this: children who are read aloud to at least 3 times a week by a family member are almost twice as likely to score in the top 25% in reading compared to children who are read to less than 3 times a week. And this came from a study that was published in 2002 by the U.S. Department of Education. And I love sharing this study, not because I want to tell you to only read aloud to your kids 3 days a week, but because I think this statistic gives us so much grace as homeschool parents, that even if we only get to it 3 days a week, even if we miss more days than we make, we still are going to have a really huge positive impact on our kids. We're still going to have them be twice as likely to be in the top 25% of readers just by making that effort to read out loud to them, even if we only make it half the time. Allegra says good stuff. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's really encouraging because this is so powerful and so important to be doing. And we don't have to be perfect. It's okay to miss a day or two. It's okay to have a bad day where your child is tired or the routine gets messed up or you have something else going on and you don't get to it. That's okay. The point is to make it a habit, to build it into your family's routine, like what we've been talking about with what you guys have been saying, and to make it something that you try to do on a consistent basis. So that's super, super important. And to that end, I wanted to share a bonus that I made for you, and that is a set of read aloud trackers. I probably should have put this link in the description too, but I will drop it in the comments of the video. And this is a printable that you can go and grab for free over in my shop. And it has calendars, and it has games, and it has stuff that you can do to track your read aloud time with your kids. So there's a 20 book read aloud challenge and a 50 book read aloud challenge, and a little board game where you can color in a book each time you finish a book with your child that will move you along the board game. And there's a calendar, and there's booklet. No, there's not book. There's a book, like a book list to record the books that you've read. And there's a list to write down topics that you want to read about. So just lots of different resources if you're looking to be able to spend more time reading out loud with your kids this year in 2023. This is going to be a good resource to help you build those more consistent habits. So definitely go and check that out. The link is in the chat, in the comments below the video, and I'll try to add it to the description after I get done here as well. Okay, so today I wanted to quickly share 5 skills that you can teach your kids as you're reading out loud to them that will really help you make the most of that read aloud time. And this is actually something that I shared as well this morning inside the Happy Hive Homeschool Facebook group. And when I was in there, I shared book recommendations to go along with each of these skills. So if you want to hear a super in-depth explanation of all the skills along with book recommendations, you're definitely going to want to go check that group out. There are a lot of really helpful resources in there for including the holidays in your homeschool. So I'm going to put a link to that group too in the comments here so that you can head on over there and watch that live if you would like and get the book recommendations, and then also stick around and see the holiday homeschool recommendations as well. The group leader, Christy, is a friend of mine, and she is a fantastic resource as well. She's graduated kids from homeschool, and so I always love to spend time with people who have done what I'm trying to do, and so it's always encouraging to spend time with her. So definitely go check that group out. But here, I just want to quickly share 5 reading strategies that you can teach your kids while you're reading out loud with them in 2023. So the first one that I wanted to share is actually not so much a reading strategy, but more of an encouragement. And that is that as we're reading out loud to our kids, we are developing a love of reading in them. And this can start when your child is just a baby. Whenever you are spending time with your child and you're having quality time and there's a book involved, that's a win, because that's the way that you help your child to see and to start to associate those positive, good feelings that they have when they spend time with you and they're enjoying that time with books as well. And so that's a really good way to teach our kids that books are important and to help them to be able to develop that love of books even from a very young age before they can read on their own. And this is a really great way to just start your kid off right and start the learning to read process with a child who's excited about reading, which is a big help and a big step forward for them. We can teach our kids things like how to hold a book and how to turn the pages, and it can be really helpful whenever we have books that have some way for them to engage. So flat books, touch and feel books, follow the direction books, those books with the little strip down the side with the little annoying sounds that they can play. As much as I don't like those books as an adult, I know that my kids love those books, and they're a really great way to get kids to engage. So it's a necessary evil in our house. So any of those kind of fun books are really great for this first step, which is just to introduce a love of reading. A second thing that you can do during read alouds is work on letter names and letter sounds. This is especially good anytime that you have an alphabet book. We had an I Spy alphabet book that was great for this because kids had to look for the individual letters. And so it was great for practicing those letter shapes and starting to recognize those. Alphabet books are also really great if they have alliteration. You know, those ones, Betty bought a bit of butter, where it all has the same first letter. Those are great for teaching letter sounds and for exposing our kids to those as well. So alphabet skills is the second one, and those are super important because those are that very first building block in teaching our kids to read that we need them to know. The third thing that you can do when you're teaching your child to read and you're reading out loud to them is to point to the words. And if you get nothing else out of today, this is what I would encourage you to go and try tonight in that reading time before bed. You're going to want to, as you're reading out loud to your child, just point to the words that you're reading. Let me see if I've got one. How do I not have a book right here? All right, this is one of the books that I shared inside of the Happy Hive Homeschool group this morning. This is Valentine's Day by Anne Rockwell. So as you're reading to your child, you're just going to be pointing to the words. Mine says, "Please be my Valentine." And this is really helpful for a couple of reasons. It's called print referencing, and research has shown that when you do that while you're reading out loud to your child, that it has lots of benefits for them. It helps them to see that the words on the page, those combinations of letters, represent something else. That those letters represent words, which represent ideas. And that symbolic thinking is something that kids need to have in order to be a reader. And it's a really key developmental skill that we're working on with them whenever we're reading to them. Kids are also learning by osmosis, things like the text goes from left to right, and we start with the words on the top of the page and work our way down. And those kinds of things are not things that kids are born knowing, and they're super important for kids to know when they're reading a book. And so all of those are things that we can be teaching by osmosis just by pointing to the words while we're doing something that we already were doing anyway, which is reading out loud to our kids. Another thing that you can do when you're reading out loud to your child is you can teach reading comprehension. And I actually recommend that you teach reading comprehension during read alouds and not during the time when your child is learning to read or when they're practicing with a reader or a decodable book or whatever it is that you have. There are some really fantastic readers inside of the Reading Better Together curriculum where parents and kids can read out loud together. They take turns reading pages, but even still, I recommend that you teach your reading comprehension skills mostly during read alouds. And the reason for that is that when kids are learning how to read and they're really focused on decoding those words, on figuring out what word it is that they're reading, that takes so much of their brain power that it can be really hard for them to have any energy left over to focus on meaning. Sometimes it's all it takes for them just to make it through to the end of the line, and they have no idea what they read because their brain is so taxed by all of the other stuff. So it can be really good to separate out reading comprehension as a separate strategy and to teach that separately during read alouds. And then over time, as your kids become more fluent readers and better at decoding, they will be able to pick up that reading comprehension piece because the decoding won't be taking up so much of their brain. Right. So we can teach reading comprehension when we are teaching our kids, when we're reading out loud to our kids. And when I'm doing this, I normally ask two different kinds of questions. The first one is super basic, like a recall question. I'll ask things that they could easily answer if they were paying attention as I was reading the previous page. And my only goal there is just to keep them on their toes, to make sure that they're still paying attention and that no minds have wandered, nobody's sleeping while I'm trying to read to them, that kind of thing. And then the second thing I'm doing is asking more critical thinking or reasoning questions to be able to really see how their reading comprehension skills are growing. So I might ask a more in-depth like how or why kind of question based on the book. Why do you think this happened? How do you think they did that? That kind of thing. Or I might ask my child to relate what they saw in the book back to their own life. So in this Valentine's Day book that we were looking at a few minutes ago, they were making Valentines. And so I might ask my child, what kind of a Valentine would you make? Or who would you like to make a Valentine for? Just to help them to be able to relate what it is that they're reading to their own life. And then the last strategy that I like to teach kids or work on while we're reading out loud is vocabulary. And vocabulary is really important for kids as they're reading out loud because it gives us an opportunity to explain words and situations that our kids might not know. And vocabulary is great because we can work on this no matter what age our kids are. And this is one of the reasons why it's really important to continue reading out loud to your child even after they can read out loud for themselves. Because we can continue to expose our kids to more difficult books, more complex plots, and more advanced vocabulary than they would be able to read on their own. And so we can continue to help them with these reading comprehension skills as we continue to read out loud to them even after they're a fluent reader. So definitely continue to do that. When we're teaching vocabulary, we just want to kind of be aware as we're reading through. And anytime that you come to a word that you think your child might not know, you can stop and ask them, do you know what that means? And if they don't, you can just provide a quick definition and give them an example and move on. So it's a really easy way just to include some extra vocabulary in your day and to make sure that your child is continuing to learn those skills. So those are some things that you can work on teaching while you are reading out loud. And I love this because all of these skills are things that you can do during the time that you're already spending. So you don't need to add any kind of extra time into your day to teach these skills. So quickly to review, we had teaching a love of reading to little kids by getting them engaged and involved in the book. We had working on letter names and letter sounds. We talked about pointing to words. We talked about reading comprehension by asking questions, and then we talked about vocabulary. And those are all things that you can do while you're reading out loud to your child. If you haven't yet, make sure that you grab the Read Aloud trackers. There was a link in the comments of this video to those. That is a free gift, something that I made for you just to help you be accountable in 2023 to yourself and to make it a little bit more fun to include more read aloud time in your day. Also, if you have questions about teaching your child to read out loud or about teaching your child to read any of these strategies or anything else that we've talked about, go ahead and leave those in the comments as well. I would love to answer those. I also wanted to let you know that I have another really fun topic planned for us next week. I'll be back here live in the group again at 3 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday next week to talk about readers. And we're going to be talking about all different kinds of readers next week. And we're going to be talking specifically about what kind of readers work the best when you're teaching your child to read and which ones you should avoid. I have some pretty strong thoughts about this, and I'm really excited to share them with you. I'm going to be sharing some specific readers, and I'm going to be talking about which ones really work well with your child and with the science of how their brain learns how to read. And I'm also going to be talking about some really popular readers that are very common or commonly used, especially in homeschool, that don't work very well. And I'm going to be talking about why they don't and what you can do instead. So you're definitely going to want to check that out next week. I hope that you all have a wonderful week and enjoy your read aloud time with your kids. Talk to you later. Bye. I hope you enjoyed this video, which was recorded live in the Homeschool Reading Community Group. This is a free Facebook group where I share tips and advice about homeschooling and teaching reading. You'll also find community with other homeschool moms like you, plus freebies, giveaways, parties, and more. I would love for you to join us over at the Homeschool Reading Community. Make sure that you check out the link in the description of this video for all the details.